to the Tough Fish Show. I am so excited to bring to you Natalya Androsova. Natalya, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much, Jen. I'm so excited and delighted and honored and grateful.
Oh, thank you so much. I am so glad you're here. And I would love for you to start with, how did you get into writing?
Oh boy, how did I get into writing? Mm, I I think there are two stories. I think one is I wish it was a better story, but it was heartbreak, you know. So when I was 13, I had some kind of a misunderstanding with two of my best friends, and I went to journaling. I discovered writing for me. I still to this day think that they were my angels because they're still in my life. But for that year, they gave me the gift of writing. So I discovered journaling and I discovered poetry. And so that was my, confidant. My journal was where I came to ask questions about myself, my life, my relationships. And the other side is when I was 4 years old, I was the youngest in my courtyard, and we would come out with my friends and we had this beautiful gazebo with two desks, and we would sit down and write together. So I also discovered writing together when I was 4.5. So I was just doodling, I was copying some songs lyrics, but sitting together with others and writing together, that was something I remembered for the rest of my life.
Oh, I love both of those. But what I hear you really describing is how personal and cathartic writing is, because whether even when you're sitting in a group, it's still between you and what's on that page
Exactly.
and the
Yeah.
processing that you're doing. So, and depending upon where you are in life or what's going on, that processing is going to look one way in that moment, and then it will shift differently. Like when you're reading a book, you can read it in that space at that time and it communicates one thing. But then if you reread that or just even reread another chapter, you're going to be in a different space, which means that book or that section might speak to you just a little differently than it did the first time. Would you agree?
Absolutely, absolutely. And being in that space with others where everyone is looking inside, there's something sacred about that silence when you're working together and you learn to honor it when you're so young. It was really magical because we also played very loudly with my friends, but that was a special time where all of us would bring notebooks. And I remembered that. I fell in love with working with others or yeah, creating. Sometimes some of my friends are painters, but yeah, I carry it through my life. I can't help it.
Oh, I love that. I think that that's really, really cool. I love that.
Thank you.
And I like how you expanded that to any form of creation, really, how that can it show up. But with writing, sometimes it can be it's easily to be perceived as such a solitude activity because relatively speaking, I mean, it's what you choose to communicate on that page, whether you edit it out or you keep it there or however many iterations it takes to get it to publication. But there's something synergistic about having so many others creating too.
Yes, it's both support and accountability and just honoring each other's practice. And for me, I like how you said it's a cathartic and personal process. For me, it's everything. It's been my professional practice, but it's also been my personal and spiritual practice, writing. I bring my whole life to it. I bring myself to it, and I give it to writing, and then I don't know what happens. It's an alchemical medium, and then time disappears and I come back out and I can see how honest, how authentic, how open I was able to be this time when I came to the page. So it's my teacher.
Oh, I love how you describe that. That's beautiful. And I know that, so when you go from thinking about what you've written as a child, and processing in the journaling, I mean, I journal still because journaling helps me, as you were describing, to like sift through. And sometimes it's a matter of really just exploring how you're feeling about something. Sometimes it's also a matter of exploring, you know if you could go this direction, what's it going to feel like? If you go this direction, like if you're processing a decision, sometimes just writing out what would it feel like if you went with direction A, or what would it feel like if you go with direction B? Just sometimes it can help in that way too. So this writing that you did as a young person, So how did that evolve to where you are, where you got your first book published?
Oh, thank you. It's such a good question. I think it's become my, I think it's directly related, and I think it's become my tool for self-honesty. So when I think that practice was the foundation of my book of writing meditations, because I noticed when I was a kid, I was so confused. Writing was my way to make sense of my life. So I would ask myself questions, and I noticed that whenever I would bring a question or a problem to my writing, or an emotion, right? Like it's so hard to make sense of those emotions you're feeling when you're a teenager. So I would put it in my journal. And maybe I came to it feeling like all, scattered. But then I would notice that after a paragraph or two, some wise voice would appear and give me answers or some space, and there was a relaxation. I was always wondering, what is that? So there was like a change in the voice. So there was a whiny kid saying, ma, ma, ma. And then there was this wise voice kind of advising myself. So it was the beginning of my relationship with, some people call it the inner child. I call it the writer within, but with myself, basically. And so I continued that practice since I was 13. I wrote a lot and regularly. And then I started posting. I've been a writing coach and consultant for over 2 decades. So I started hosting writing groups, stress-free writing, writing for wellness. And I would provide those prompts for people, those same questions I ask myself, and they would always ask for more. And it was students, it was my colleagues, it was staff and faculty at my university, and everyone would be asking me, do you have more? Do you have more of these prompts? So I could see people resonated. I could see they had their own answers, and their wisdom was, shared. Even my 18-year-old students who just came, and it was such a beautiful, rich experience. And because everyone was always asking for more, I said, yeah, I have boxes at home. And so my friends encouraged me to put it into a book. So I never meant to. This is the book, like, these are the questions I was asking myself to make sense of my life. It was it was a compilation of maybe 500 prompts, and I sifted through them and I realized, oh, they're all about relationships with myself, with others, with my life, with getting older, with love, with fear. And so it fell into those chapters after many years. I just let it fall and show me. So that's how the book was born. I never meant to publish it. I was just writing for myself to process my life. And then I was amazed that they resonated with people, and I was encouraged, and I'm glad I took a chance.
I love that because sometimes you fall into something like that. Like there are times when you deliberately set out, I'm going to write a book. And other times it's the writing that just comes, and it's almost kind of like it ignited something inside that said, ooh, now where can this go? Ooh, what's the next step? And it almost kind of created its own form of like a little lantern. It sounds like here's this light, look at this step. Okay, are you ready? Once you've taken that, I'll show you the next step. But
Mhm.
I love how you describe that, because it sounds like what you were writing in its own way, it started to show you who its readers were too, that you wrote from one space, and because it was connecting with others, it started to show you who that was, so you knew how to connect with them a little bit more. So turning it into a book felt easier, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Is that kind of how it felt to you?
Absolutely. I relied so much on my coaching practice and my writing groups when I was composing this book, because I could see the words and the faces and the names of people who came and how they shared. And I remembered the story they shared 20 years ago in response to this prompt. Like, I still remember everyone's stories. I don't know why, they're just so powerful. And so it was always like talking with them, but I did have to rewrite it several times to find the right voice, because I was like, is it I, is it you? Because I really wrote it for myself. But I found a balance of I and we, because it's my practice, but I'm sharing it with others, not as my practice, but as a practice I love, and as an invitation into themselves, right? To investigate and to discover. And so in a way it's let's walk together and let's use this beautiful tool for self-discovery.
I love that you mentioned that you moved between, the different points of view, but it sounds like you moved between those differences in a sense where it felt natural to do so versus saying it all has to be second person, or it all has to be third, or it all has to be first, or what have you. It was what does this piece need to be, and how do I blend the pieces before and after or within this section so it feels connected and it feels like it's blending, but yet it still is speaking as as its own little individual spot too.
Thank you, Jen. It was such a painful process, actually. I had an encounter with an editor whom I admired so much, and she was the editor I contacted because she was an editor of the editor of one of my favorite books on writing. And I reached out, and she suggested a change in voice, but she also suggested some things that once I tried them on, I had to find the balance between listening to someone I admire and hold on a pedestal and, listen to wholeheartedly, and then self-trust. So this book, it did so much for me. It taught me self-trust. You may notice in what I'm sharing in the public space on social media, it's about dealing with self-doubt, because my struggle was my teacher and now my strength. So I had to choose between listening to someone else. And I even tried, I rewrote it in one voice that she suggested, and it wasn't me. And I tend to defer. I tend to be shy, and I tend to defer to people, um, and that was my victory. I found that I have to trust the text. I have to trust what I know. I have to trust being with all these people, and I have to honor them and everything they've taught me and how we are in those writing groups. So I had a lot to honor. So it wasn't just like I discard that person. I still admire them and respect, but getting that feedback, it was rough. And so I went into like a 3 or 4 year slumber. I put the book away and I decided that it's not for me. Publishing is not for me. So I always wrote, but I never shared my writing. But I had to go through self-doubt to find self-trust and self-compassion and faith. And it was a very pivotal moment. And so I took a chance. And the event that changed that, because I was approaching publishers and I was approaching agents and editors, I was getting very good feedback. I actually, do you know whom I contacted? I contacted the agent who accepted Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way to publication 25 years ago. And she read my manuscript 2 times and she gave me encouragement. But again, she said, I'm sorry, I cannot, at this point, I cannot accept it because I can't sell it for you. And so there was a lot of rejections. And then I read an article that one of my favorite books, The Artist's Way, the book that changed generations of writers, was rejected 44 times before it was accepted to publication. And something happened. I remember sitting and reading that, and I've decided I'm going to take a chance. I'm going to learn everything about self-publishing. I'm going to do it. So it was Julia who gave me the strength to just take a chance. And
Okay, you have hit on so many things in that I think are absolutely awesome. So first off, to your point, when you were writing something, and it really doesn't matter what it is, relatively speaking. Obviously, the more personal it is, the more vulnerable you feel. But still, writing a piece and then choosing to share said writing with someone else is a vulnerable act. It is something that you you've shared something that you've done the best you can with it, or you might even know there's something more to do, but you got it to a point that you felt okay to at least let somebody else into your world to say, hey, what do you think? So there is a vulnerability there. And there's a dance of figuring out, when do you put yourself out there? How do you recharge? How do you restore from whatever feedback you get? And then how do you keep going? But you're going back to trusting yourself and recognizing your body. You will hear in your inner knowing to say, hey, take a step back. Are you listening to things more outside than listening to that still small voice inside you? Or did a couple of those voices outside say something that went, that's giving me cause for pause. Maybe I need to go back, but I still need to do it my way. It's still my book. It's still my voice. So, as an editor, when I offer comments and constructive feedback to my clients, I'm looking at that as my goal is to support their vision and their voice. But at the end of the day, it's their book, and it's perfectly acceptable for them to say, thanks, Jen, but no, I don't feel like that's right for me, or I get it, but I need to do it in its different way, because, well, it's theirs. And to be gracious with that. But what I love what you did was that, yeah, it might have given you a set to figure out, but you found another way, and you found another way that really felt good to you. So self-publishing became that path. And not only did you do it once, you've done it multiple times now.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I actually have experience before publishing this book, The 7 Minutes. I have it here. I had published another book with a local traditional publisher as a ghostwriter. So it was a book about gratitude, which was wonderful. I just wanted to give myself experience of writing and to know that I can write a book, but I wasn't strong enough to, again, trust my own ideas, So after that, this book, it taught me so much about self-trust, and I wanted this for everyone, because I knew how painful self-doubt was. I sat in that space for a few years, just completely silent, gained weight, just was in a, not not really depressed state, but depressed for a writer. Like, I was still functioning in my life, but I just thought, I just put my book away and I locked the drawer, So I thought that was it. But then it gave me so much courage, this book. It gave me so much courage. It's not perfect, but I made choices and it taught me so much. So the second book, it gave me courage to say no to one of the biggest publishers in UK, Palgrave. So the second book, it's called Dissertation Without Tears. I was writing it for my graduate students, mostly PhD students, and some graduate students, because that's what I do. That's my job. I'm a writing and dissertation coach. So I got a yes from Palgrave. I submitted my book proposal. They loved it. We had a phone call. They complimented me on my voice, the flow, the content, everything. They just wanted to change one little thing. They wanted me to change my audience. They said if I rewrote it for undergraduate students, it could sell better, and they could promote it to courses. And I thanked them. And I cried in my office, and I walked over to my boss, she's no longer my boss, but she remained a good friend and my writing buddy. But we always wrote together. And I walked over to her office and locked the door. And I said, I just said no to Palgrave. I said no, but thank you, but no. And, there was part of me that wanted to rewrite and get this publishing contract with one of the best publishers. And again, knowing my audience, knowing the struggle of a poor PhD student who is handling life, children, parents, demands of their job, demands of their studying, and knowing how lonely that place felt when I was going through it allowed me to stay true to myself, to my audience. And I said no, and I chose to write it for a very small audience. So both books went to #1 in multiple countries in multiple categories. And I'm shocked, because this one, it was specifically, I wrote it for a very small audience, and it gave me such peace. All my decisions were very simple. I knew my PhD student who's struggling alone. Everyone thinks they're brilliant, and they are, but it comes with the assumption that they don't need any help, and it's not true. So I wanted to give them that hand to help them cross the finish line. And I wrote it, and I was comfortable that, people seem to think it speaks to other writers as well. So but I didn't plan the marketing or to reach a large audience. I knew and I think knowing your audience is just, it was such peace in me and such joy. So it was very easy to just go with my heart and know I didn't betray myself. I'm not changing it. I know my audience. They need this book. I'm writing it for them. I don't care if 2 people buy it, but yeah.
I love that. I love that you said, I know my audience, and you could describe your audience. And it wasn't just simply, they're working on their PhD. You got into some of the nuances about them, what they're juggling, what's going on, what they might be thinking, or how they might be perceived by others, but they know. And because you understand those nuances, that is such a great example of being able to connect with your audience, connecting with your reader, because you're touching them, you're talking to them, and that translates nicely when you're communicating about what you've written and who's it for. So yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
really cool.
It's actually there talking to me in my head, because I started writing this book. I was working with a lot of PhD students, and they would tell me the same things. I'm not a good writer. Writing is hard. I need more time. I'm never going to finish. Who am I to write? Like imposter syndrome. So this book deals with 58 writing myths, but they were the common, these were things I heard from people over and over again. So I started writing them down. I was like, oh my goodness, everyone's struggling with the same things, with the same stories. So while a lot of the stories, speak to other writers, there are very specific stories for anyone who's writing a long project. So it can be a dissertation, a thesis, or a book. It's just a long process. It's for marathon writers, marathon runners. Okay, marathon writers.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a really great point that you're mentioning, because you can, when you start out a project, when you start out on something that's a longer duration, whatever that is, the beginning feels light, it feels exciting, it feels like, yeah, I can do this. Oh yeah. And it's like it almost seems like you've got all this energy, you can go all day. And then the
And then,
bumps start to hit. And then if you're running a marathon, the weather might change on you. It might just start to feel a little different, or the terrain has changed. And then your body might be doing one thing and your mind's doing another. And, then it becomes, are you sure you want to finish this? We could do this another time. Are you sure this is a great idea? But
yeah.
something in you wants to find a way to keep going. Even if you're walking, at some point you stop and walk and you pick it back up to run. But with writing, it's a similar element to it. So how would you encourage someone who might be in that messy middle, or that slump, or where they feel like they have gotten in their heads and said, I don't know that I can do this. I'm going to put my dissertation away in that box and put it over here because it's getting too hard, or I'm too scared, or just so much of life has gotten in the way. I'm not even sure where to pick back up again. What would you tell them?
Thank you, Jen. It's such a pleasure to talk to you, because you're an experienced writer. You describe everything so precisely. That's exactly what happens to people. And I think that's my favorite moment, to catch them, when they're about to give up, because I was this close to giving up. And so I can speak truly, and I can just catch them, let them catch their breath, and teach them that, while share with them what I found, that while we cannot control what the inner critic says to us, and barrage of negative thoughts about our ability and our fit to be a writer, and all those imposter thoughts, we don't have to control that. We can choose the relationship. So for me, every writer has to choose between being friends with the inner critic, or being friends with the writer within. And so it comes back to this 180-degree turn, and turning inward and being there for ourselves, to support ourselves and our writer within. So to me, you choose that relationship. You found yourself in the relationship with the inner critic. You never chose it. It's just this voice that tells you things about yourself, but you can choose whether you take it seriously or not. And do you need to stay in this relationship? You can just break up, or you can just, there are so many tricks on how to just leave them alone, and they, they're just doing their job. The inner critic, they're just looking after you and looking out for you. But you can choose the self-trust over self-doubt. You can choose to lean on that in those moments. You can choose to find ways to support yourself, your soul, your writer within, your inner child, your dreams. And so it's not that hard, but I think it's just realizing, just self-awareness of what is my relationship with myself, with my writing, with my practice, with my inner critic. And yeah, and just choosing differently, just choosing to ally, choosing to be an ally and friend, and to fall in love with your writer within, and that gentle voice that allows us to dream, to be curious, open, honest, try things out, play lightly, to say things that are completely wrong, humbly take it back, experiment. There's just freedom and joy to me. So it's that I want to give to the writers. I do want them to finish their projects, and they do, but my way, it's not like discipline and more books, more knowledge. No. Self-knowledge, self-awareness, self-love, self-compassion is the only way. So becoming your own friend, taking your own hand, and gently, playfully going to that finish line, and seeking help as well, seeking your community, seeking podcasts like yours, seeking books that support you. And just, I think writers are very generous folks, don't you find? I think we
Oh, I
love
do.
each other. Yeah.
Yeah. And one of the things that was really speaking to me as I was listening to you was really just remember the accomplishments that you've already had, whether or not it's in writing or not. But have you done something that was, difficult, that you thought was difficult, when, and you had never done it, so, and you were a little scared, but then you did it and you mastered it, or you enjoyed it, or you did a great job and wanted to do that again? Did you plan an extensive vacation? Did you host a big family gathering or a big party that felt overwhelming? Or did you write smaller pieces and set out to get them published and get good feedback? Have you spoken in public before and it went well, and so you want to try again with maybe a different audience? So remembering all of the successes that you have had, no matter how you have them, and then recognize if, well, if you did those, then you can do this too, even if you have to build into it a little bit, but you have had successes and you can do it because you've already proven to yourself that you can. So shifting that and going, why can't I do this too? So that's what I hear you saying.
Yes, I love it. It's so, you worded it so beautifully. I just loved listening to it. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
I want to add one more thing to that. Choosing what you want to honor, because we all have our inner critic. Mine is not silent. It's still there, says things. I love it. It's cute, but choosing what we honor. Do I have to honor everything they say? Do I have to, or can I honor the writers who inspired me, Julia Cameron, who gave me the inspiration and the freedom? Can I honor my curiosity when I'm approaching this research question? Because I want to make the world a better place. I want to give something to my community. Can I honor the love, the curiosity, the joy, and then forget about, writing an amazing document, a book? Can I just honor my love of the craft? Can I honor what a beautiful the process of self-discovery? And so I last week I spoke to a student who was writing philosophy, and it's very heavy, it's dense. But I said, what if your dissertation was a love letter to this philosopher who inspired you and changed your life? And she loved it. It was I think on Valentine's Day. She's, yes, a love letter. So I think just reimagining our work and honoring what we love and saying, I'm going to do it imperfectly, with great love, humbly, ready to be wrong, but I must express what my heart wants to say. And no one can stop me, because why would I stop myself? Just without arrogance, like as an apprentice to the craft, let me explore. Oh, I'm going to allow myself to explore and enjoy it.
I love how you phrase it as a love letter when I'm working with, especially nonfiction writers,
Mm-hmm.
and I can tell that they're figuring out their reader a little bit more.
Yeah.
What I would encourage them to do is write a love letter to their reader. Write a
Wow.
little love letter to their reader that says, why are you writing this book? Why is it so important to you to write this book so that for this reader, why is it this reader that you want to connect with? Because part of that can turn into an introduction for the book, but
Mhm.
really that activity is intended for you to sit with who you think that person is and writing to the one person who you are envisioning as that reader so that you can really connect. And then you'll see if the examples that you use or the way you phrase something that you in the book, or the story arcing, if you will, the transformation you're creating, it's going to resonate with who you wrote that love letter to. And then you can go back to that love letter and go, how cool is this? This was written out of love. I created this for love. And I can see that I honored this too, because sometimes doing that helps to really start to ground into who you're writing for. If it feels like it could be a lot of different areas, because if it's a lot, then it's still not focused enough. You want to really be able to focus it in to that right area. Would you agree?
Perfect. I love that. I love that trick. I'm gonna try it too. Thank you for sharing. Yeah, I think what I resonated with and what you're saying, it's connecting to that love. Because for me, so many writers, they think, at the end of the book writing process, when I publish, that will be the day I'll feel the joy and the love and the accomplishment. And I'm saying, no, don't miss every delicious day, every hour of being with your work. It's not over there on the other side of the published book. It's right here. So what do you love and whom do you love? Like you said, your audience, like how do you want to serve? What is your greater why? And so connecting to that love kind of helps remove the fear. Yes, so it can be imperfect. Yes, so people may think it's insignificant and won't buy it. So what? That's not my goal. That's not what I'm after. The love is right here. And so writing from that place, from that joy and that freedom. But first you have to give it to yourself and allow
Yes.
it. And then you don't have to wait for years and months. You can just support yourself and enjoy every single moment of your practice.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I have loved this conversation. Speaking of love, and Natalya, I know that you mentioned being a writing coach, especially a dissertation coach, but I know that you work with writing groups.
Yes.
And I can just tell that that love parlays over into that space so beautifully. Where can people connect with you? Where can they potentially work with you in different group settings or retreats or what have you? Where can they get your books?
Thank you so much, Jen. So the best place is my website. It's writingdissertationcoach.com, one word, and everything is there. My group programs, I run the Imperfectionist Club, the different writing retreats regularly, and my books are also on Amazon and on all major online booksellers, Barnes and Nobles, yes, and yeah, all the news, all the updates are there, and all my services, everything is listed on my website. So thank you so much for asking.
Don't you have a retreat coming up in April? Well,
Yes,
at least
yes,
April 2023.
thank you. Yes, I have a retreat, 1 day retreat on April 9th. Yes, and it would be a wonderful sacred space for writers to come together and support one another. So yes, everyone is invited to join. Thank you, Jen. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm sure that there will be many more to come. So even if you are listening after the writing retreat in April, you should still go check out the website and get on Natalya's list. But Natalya, thank you so very much for joining me on the show. Thank you so much. This has been such a lovely conversation.
Thank you. I enjoyed it so much. I really love your approach to the process and to supporting writers. And I just want to thank you for everything you do for for writers and for the community. I really appreciate I really appreciate your generosity.
Well, thank you so much for telling me. I appreciate that. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Jen.